In November 23, 1996, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961, a Boeing 767, was scheduled to take off from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The flight's final destination was Nairobi, Kenya, but it was also set to make a stopover in the Comoros, a small island nation located between Madagascar and Mozambique, before continuing its journey. The flight, numbered ET-961, carried 175 passengers and a crew of 12. As the passengers boarded the aircraft at Bole International Airport in Addis Ababa, they were unaware of the looming tragedy that was about to unfold. Among them were Ethiopians, Kenyans, Comorians, and a mix of other nationalities. Some passengers had flown to Addis Ababa for business or family visits, while others were traveling for leisure. Little did they know, the flight would not reach its intended destinations. The aircraft's crew consisted of Captain Berhanu Nega, a seasoned Ethiopian Airlines pilot, and First Officer Getachew Bele, who had been with the airline for several years. The plane, a modern Boeing 767, was equipped for international travel, with ample seating capacity and all the necessary amenities for a long-haul flight. The aircraft took off from Addis Ababa smoothly, and the journey began as expected. The flight plan was standard. It would first fly toward Nairobi, with the layover in Moroni, the capital of Comoros. However, things took a drastic turn about 30 minutes into the flight, when a group of passengers who were not part of the normal passenger manifest began to make their move. These individuals were not ordinary passengers. They were hijackers with a clear plan in mind. The hijackers were 4 men, all of whom were Ethiopian nationals. Their names were Abdullah Ali, the leader of the hijackers, Mohammed A. Ahmed, Abdallah Said, and Abdul Razak Mohammed. The hijackers had been planning their attack for several months. Their goal was simple, but deeply serious. They wanted to hijack the plane, divert it to Australia, and seek asylum there. The group had come together with a singular objective: to escape Ethiopia, which was under a repressive government at the time, and to make a public statement by demanding that their government provide them with political asylum. The hijackers felt desperate, believing that their lives in Ethiopia were in danger due to their involvement in opposition activities. They saw hijacking an airplane as their only means of escape and a way to draw international attention to their cause. As the plane climbed to cruising altitude, the hijackers waited for the opportune moment. They had hidden knives and other weapons, and, around 11 a.m., they made their move. At this point, they rushed the cockpit, threatening the flight attendants and the passengers. They forced their way into the cockpit and subdued the flight crew. The hijackers, armed with knives, demanded that the pilots change course and fly to Australia. They made it clear that they would kill the hostages if their demands were not met. Captain Berhanu and First Officer Getachew were faced with a dire situation. They knew the hijackers were serious, but they also understood the gravity of what would happen if they complied. In an attempt to control the situation, the pilots tried to engage in dialogue with the hijackers, but their efforts were in vain. The hijackers were determined. As the hijackers threatened violence, the pilots had no choice but to comply with their demands, fearing for the lives of everyone on board. The aircraft, which had been en route to Nairobi, was now headed toward the Indian Ocean, with the hijackers insisting that it be flown to Australia. At 11:25 a.m., the Boeing 767 changed its course and started heading southeast in the direction of Australia. By this time, the situation had escalated. The hijackers, still armed with their knives, had made it clear that they would kill the passengers if their demands were not met. The pilots, under intense pressure, made a call to air traffic control. They informed the authorities that the plane had been hijacked and that the hijackers were demanding a route to Australia. Air traffic control began to take immediate steps, trying to divert other flights and alerting military and law enforcement agencies in the region. Meanwhile, the hijackers were not only threatening the lives of the passengers, but also becoming more agitated as they realized that their plan might not go as smoothly as they had hoped. Around 12:15 p.m., as the aircraft approached the Indian Ocean, the hijackers realized they were running out of options. The plane had no fuel to reach Australia, and the pilots were running out of time. They were also aware that there were no airports within reasonable reach where they could land. The hijackers, however, still refused to relinquish control of the aircraft, and the situation grew increasingly tense. The flight crew, aware of the danger they were in, tried to delay the inevitable. They attempted to communicate with the hijackers, but it was clear that the situation was now a standoff. At approximately 12:30 p.m., after hours of tension, the aircraft began to experience fuel exhaustion. The hijackers, realizing that their situation had become more desperate, ordered the pilots to look for an emergency landing site. However, there were no viable landing options. The plane had already passed any suitable airports, and the nearest land was still too far away. As the plane flew over the Indian Ocean, Captain Berhanu and First Officer Getachew made one last attempt to avoid disaster. They tried to maneuver the aircraft in such a way that they could extend the flight time just long enough to find a suitable place to land. But by 12:40 p.m., the engines sputtered and died. The aircraft was now gliding over the ocean, with no power left. The hijackers were still demanding that the plane be diverted to Australia, but it was clear to everyone on board that this was no longer an option. At this point, the pilots realized that their only chance for survival and to avoid a catastrophic crash was to attempt an emergency landing in the ocean. They made a final call to air traffic control, warning them that they were about to ditch the aircraft. At 12:42 p.m., the Boeing 767 began its descent into the Indian Ocean. The hijackers, still holding the crew and passengers at knife point, were unaware of the technical difficulties the pilots were facing. The plane was descending quickly, and within moments, the water became visible below. The plane struck the water at an angle, causing a violent impact that split the fuselage. The force of the crash was enormous, and the water flooded the cabin almost immediately. The crash was a catastrophic failure, and many passengers perished on impact. The majority of the passengers who survived the initial crash were left stranded in the ocean, clinging to debris or struggling to swim in the open water. The aftermath was grim. The wreckage of the plane was scattered over a wide area of the Indian Ocean. A massive search and rescue operation was launched, but the conditions were treacherous, and the vast area made it difficult for rescuers to find all the survivors. Ultimately, 125 people were confirmed dead, including all the hijackers. Only 50 passengers and crew members survived, many of them rescued hours after the crash. The survivors were left emotionally and physically traumatized by the event, but they were thankful to be alive. The hijacking and crash of Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961 were a stark reminder of the lengths some individuals would go to in order to escape oppression. The tragic loss of life, coupled with the hijackers' failed attempt to gain asylum, left a deep impact on the world. The incident led to major changes in airline security and hijacking prevention measures, further emphasizing the importance of vigilance and preparedness in the face of such threats. As for the hijackers, their plans were thwarted by the plane's crash, and they paid the ultimate price for their actions. The tragedy of Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961 remains one of the most significant aviation disasters in history, highlighting the dangers posed by hijackings and the desperate measures taken by those who feel they have no other choice. Kindly like, share, comment, and subscribe for more Headliners stories.